The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we talk dollars and cents of the sports, industrial, media, entertainment complex. I'm joined by Rich and Steve. Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, it's a very early morning here because I'm an hour behind these two guys, and so it is truly IJB early morning, but that's okay. We do have an announcement to make off the top. Rich is leaving us because he doesn't like us and is tired of talking to us every 2 weeks. No, that's not true. Rich is moving on to do other things. He probably won't be permanently gone. We may see him as an occasional replacement perhaps, but I'd just like to thank you, Rich, for a year and a half or so of some great shows, and we hope you have fun in your coming endeavors.
Well, guys, I really appreciate it. I didn't even realize it's been that long, and this has been great. I'll tell everybody over the NFL Network, how great you guys, are, and so I'll see you over there at some point.
Yeah, he got a better gig. He's going to be a national correspondent for the NFL Network now, so we can't do our coming show.
I'm getting getting my suits together for Michael Irvin, so I can rival some of his clown gear that he has.
Yeah, this is episode 39, and so we have done almost a year and a half of these now. So, but anyway, wow. Rich, thanks very much, and everybody will hear from you at some point.
Yeah, I'll still be around.
And he's not really going to the NFL Network.
No, I'm not going to the NFL Network. I'm just doing some other. I got a big project that I'm trying to do for my university, and I just I have to devote all my time to that.
Well, I'll look forward to continuing to spar, jar, and joke on Twitter. So you won't be that far away, Rich, so no. We'll continue to goof off there.
And we do have a replacement for Rich, but we'll let that person introduce himself on the next show.
Chris Cooley? Oh, no, I'm just...
Yeah, it's going to be Chris Cooley. He's going to talk about pottery, though, not football.
I've been checking out that Kevin Sheehan podcast lately.
Been really good.
Yeah,
it's been good.
Yeah, podcasts are so much better than broadcast radio at this point.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into our first topic. We're going to start off with the National Football League, as is our habit during the fall season, and look a little bit at some changes the NFL is mulling with their direct TV deal. Rich, you brought the story to our attention. Do you want to introduce it for us?
Yeah, so the NFL is on the verge of making a big move with ending its partnership with DirecTV, and this could be major because they're actually saying that perhaps that streaming is overtaking satellite. And I've never been I never really considered DirecTV, considering a lot of the technical things, and it's gotten better over the years. But this could be major for DirecTV because outside of that, what else do they really have?
First of all, I have always wondered why the NFL even had the DirecTV package. And there was a big lawsuit about this, and I can't remember really the exact details, but the NFL and DirecTV have kept a lot of lawyers employed for years, between the two of them. What I've always wondered is, the streaming is an issue now, but I've always wondered why the NFL limited themselves to the presentation of the Sunday Ticket on essentially one television provider network. It seemed to me it would have been smarter for them to sell it to every cable network. I never really understood why they got in bed with DirecTV. Because like you, Rich, I just never wanted to deal with a satellite dish because it's just a pain in the butt. And so I've never had it. And for that reason, I've I've never been able to watch a Sunday Ticket, but I've never understood why the NFL did this.
So as I think everyone knows, or I'll restate, the three of us are Washington Redskins fans, and on this, part of a Washington Redskins focused podcast network. So I've been out of the DC viewing market since about '95, and this has been a very frustrating thing for me for a long time because first of all, you live in a city. You can't really, hanging a satellite on a rental apartment just isn't a reality. It is the very cumbersome technology, and once you get past a certain age, you don't necessarily want to spend 6 to 8 hours of your Sunday afternoon in a dark bar, or maybe you may want to, but you shouldn't. So this has been a really frustrating issue for me, and I agree. Like, why it would enrage me, even when I didn't have two nickels to rub together, that why couldn't I pay a ransom fee to my local cable provider to get the Sunday Ticket? It was insane. And through the years, because I've had a posse of Skins fans here in New York City. 1 year a couple years we pooled DirecTV at one dude's house, but that didn't become tenable after a while. So this has been frustrating for me as a consumer, and just from these bigger issues, like why the hell would you limit your market this way? Now, obviously, I got big enough contract where they didn't care about it, but it was really frustrating on the consumer side. That said, I have now been for this, I believe, is my third at minimum, of having the DirecTV streaming package, which I think New York City and maybe one other major market was the test case in that first year that I purchased it. And I have to say, it had a lot of glitches early on, but the last 2 years, it's been pretty amazing. So it'd be curious to see, how if DirecTV just embraces that fully and tries to continue to keep the NFL, or the NFL just realizes that either through their own network or some other way they can offer that package to more people. And you're right, Rich. DirecTV as a model is dead anyway. No one at this point, no one needs to nor wants to hang a satellite. I mean, to get content. It might as well be 1972 in terms of that kind of technology. So if they lose the NFL deal, which is the only thing keeping them even remotely relevant, between that and their antiquated technology, they're done.
Yeah, I mean, because from a sports perspective, Major League Baseball has their MLB, I forget what it's called, MLB Extra Innings, and then there's the MLB TV thing you can subscribe to online. They have two different ways. Like I had MLB DirecTV this year, or MLB Extra Innings, and it worked perfectly fine. And you can buy that across a variety of. Between the two services they offer, you can buy Major League Baseball on basically any platform you have, and the NBA is the same way. You can subscribe to NBA games. It's more accessible. But the bottom line to this, as always, people always need to remember, it's always money. The NFL doesn't care if how many people can see their games through DirecTV, because DirecTV has paid them a king's ransom, billions of dollars, and based their entire marketing strategy and their entire reason for their existence on the NFL. I think Rich is exactly right, or Chris is exactly right. Sorry, Rich, that DirecTV wouldn't exist right now.
And what's interesting is, and it just switching to the NCAA for a minute. I mean, so I have cable, and I'm ashamed to say, I'm not going to say, I'm embarrassed that of how much I pay a month. But
it's ridiculous. I pay a fortune too.
Yeah, but. For college games, I get so with my cable provider, I get a smorgasbord of college football games every week. I mean, I can see whether it's through an internet, whether my cable switches over to like an internet connection or just like network. I can see Middle Tennessee State versus Ball State if I want, and that's very interesting. So while I don't have that capability with the NFL. For NCAA, it's really good with my cable provider.
Yeah, I mean, and the NFL also had the NFL and DirecTV also entered a marketing agreement with, I think it was Verizon or maybe T-Mobile. I think maybe it was right, where you could stream the games through your Verizon connected device. Or I think it was Verizon.
Yeah,
it
was.
Yeah, okay. So that was a little bit more accessible, but still, it just seemed to me that the smarter play would have been to accept a little bit less money from more networks and get a wider audience.
So
I think
here's
it would
what's
have made more money.
so here's what's interesting. I mean, there every now and then I would think about DirecTV because where I live, I literally live on a boundary line between a DC cable market and a Baltimore cable market. And what's interesting, guys, is that I don't get Redskins games in HD because where I am, the DC market HD package is not available. I get now the Baltimore, so all the Ravens games and all that is in HD. Now the only time I get Redskins games in HD is if the Redskins and the Ravens are not playing together. So if the Ravens and the Redskins are on at the same time, I get standard def. Imagine standard def.
Is that
I might as well be watching.
still a thing?
Yeah, I might as well be watching black and white. TV, so I get standard def if the Ravens and the Redskins are playing at the same time. So there was a time I'm like, do I switch to Dish or do I go to DirecTV? But thankfully, it looks like I made the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a kid who's been begging me to get DirecTV for years now, and I just refuse because I just don't want a huge satellite dish hanging off a house more than anything. It's just a hassle. So
and they still have weather related stuff. I mean, they got weather. Is that still a thing? Like with
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
well, that's between that and and let's just be clear here. It looks like, and this is according to Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, who's a big tool bag, and who I can't stand, and who he actually doesn't like us either. Believe it or not, he knows who we are, and he doesn't like us, which makes me happy. But the story was from 5 days ago. And it's called NFL Could Soon Pull the Plug on DirecTV. And it looks like the NFL has a termination option after the 2019 season. So that's the genesis of all this. And so the question is, the question for the NFL, as Rich brought up in the beginning, isn't really so much what TV network they want to go to. It's really where they want to stream the games. Because I think we can all, if there's one thing we've concluded on this show, it's that streaming is the future, which people like me don't really like, but that's the future. And so what they're really talking about is how do they stream these games online? Again, could it be through the NFL Network, just some subscription NFL package like baseball does? I don't know, but that's the real question. The real question isn't really, is Time Warner Cable and Comcast going to get the NFL package?
I mean, also streaming is just getting I guarantee you'll be streaming in 2 years, Steve, and not because it's just technically a lot easier. Either your TV already comes predisposed, so you're basically just still hitting a button on your remote control, like the actual act of watching isn't much different. Or two, you're plugging something, you're plugging what it looks like basically a USB jump drive into the DVI port of your TV. So they've also, the ease of use on just that, just from a practical standpoint, has come because I've been doing this for a while, it's come a long way. Like, I just have my Amazon Fire Stick, and I just hit a button, and I go to my NFL package on my TV. I mean, it really is not that much different than just watching cable. So and you compare that to hanging a satellite dish off the side of your house. But the one really interesting thing the NFL did to probably start to puncture this deal 3 to 4 years ago was when they started offering to cable packages, either for a premium or part of a package, that depends on your provider, the red zone. Because once they were able to give people red zone on your basic cable, which, maybe isn't great if you want to watch every snap of your home team, but for watching the league, it's amazing. And so they kind of end around to DirecTV 4 or 5 years ago when they launched that.
Yeah, I mean, in my local package, it's a tiered thing you have to subscribe to personally, which I have not done. And that's just not the way I want to watch a football game. I like to sit down and watch the entire game from beginning to end, so it's not really for me. But I know that for the fantasy guys out there particularly, that's a huge thing. And in terms of the streaming, Chris, yeah, I mean, I've got 2 kids in the house here who have Roku TVs in their rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they can, and they're plugged into our cable system as well. But I mean, they mainly watch like Netflix and some other subscription streaming things more so than they probably 90% to 10%. Honestly, the 10% being cable TV. It's to the point where I feel like I ought to just cut off their cable in their rooms just because it's totally useless. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think it's going to be the future. And so the NFL, I mean, I could foresee, I guess, in the future, an NFL app, on your TV that you subscribe to, and that's how you're going to get your games.
Yeah. That's essentially how the DirecTV app works. That's exactly how the DirecTV version works now.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to see Arizona in the 49ers, so, I got to have that.
Arizona and the 49ers. I thought I knew you, Rich.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna jump now to the quote unquote amateur version of football and major sports. Recently, a list came out that was the top 20, I believe, or 25 richest programs in college athletics. Now, this is not. This was aggregated all of their sports, but with the very top of the line admission that men's college football, men's college basketball, and the third, probably a distant one, but the third in that in terms of revenue generating was women's basketball. So really, when we look at these and discuss these 25 wealthiest programs, it's really on the backs of those three sports.
Yeah, and I've got two lists here. Number one, the list of aggregated athletic departments is from Business Insider. It's actually the 2016 list, I believe. No, I'm sorry. It's the 2018 list. And then I've got another list, which I didn't send to you guys ahead of time. That is just the football revenue from this year. But just looking, first of all, number one, on the older list, which is the athletic department list, Texas A&M is number one, and the University of Texas is number two. In case anybody wonders what matters most to universities, Texas A&M from this list, which again I think is the 2016 list, $192.6 million in revenue from the athletic department, to include an average of $58 million football revenue, $8.6 million in basketball revenue, and $1.5 million in women's basketball revenue. In the top 10 on that list, Texas A&M, Texas, Ohio State, third, Michigan, Alabama, fifth. This list didn't print right. But seventh, LSU, 9, Tennessee, and 10, Penn State. But point being is there's a reason why these programs consistently put up national championship level teams year after year after year. It's because they have way more money than everybody else. If you go to a mid-major, if you go to, I don't know, the University
FIU or Central University of Central Florida.
There you go. Their athletic department revenue is like 10% of that. It's a very, very small number compared to these big boys, and that's why it's not because Nick Saban is a outstanding recruiter, or it's really because there's a lot more money. It's just a huge variance.
I'm surprised that Nebraska's even on this list because their football program stinks. But they're on the list, and I think they're like in the 20. I think they're like 22nd or something like that, or they're 24th. But no, I look, Penn State. We've talked about it on this show. I refuse. I'm surprised I even mentioned that school's name.
I'm right there with you, man.
We see why they didn't get the death penalty, because it says it right here that they're in the top 10 of revenue, and in a college football town like Happy Valley, as they call it, up in Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania. I mean, that's all there is. So I can see why they would not get the death penalty because of all this money that they're bringing in.
Yeah, and just the ones I skipped because the thing printed wrong. Florida was number 6, and LSU was 7, 9 was Tennessee, and 8 was Oklahoma. So that was the top 10, and Penn State was 10. Yeah, and I'm right there with you, Rich, from a ethical standpoint. I will never root for Penn State again, but there's just too much money. If you ever wanted to know why these programs exist and why the networks treat them like they do and why the NCAA treats them like they do. It's because, like in the case of Penn State, $66 million average 3-year average football revenue. $66 million.
What I also think is interesting is the schools that, when I look at the basketball revenue, for instance, Texas is number 2 with football, and they bring in, 183 million total, and the football revenue is 114 million. But the basketball revenue is 16.2 million over 3 years. And Texas basketball is not exactly, a powerhouse. I bet you can't name a Texas basketball player outside of Kevin Durant, who was only there for a year.
Well, I could because I'm in Texas and you get beat over the
okay.
head with him. But your point is valid. But people need to understand that the bulk of these revenue. Notice there's no Pac-10, on this list. Like UCLA was number 25.
Is it Washington? Is it Washington and Oregon State Pac-10, or they're Pac-12?
Yeah, they're Pac-10. But point is, most of the teams on these lists are SEC and Big Ten.
I think there's a couple 10, 12, 15. But I don't think there's anybody
25.
that's not Pac-10, Big Ten, or SEC. I don't think.
Yeah, but the Pac-10 is consistently lower on these lists. That's my.
Oh yeah, they're the women's basketball of those three for sure.
And the reason though for that is that there's a Big Ten network, there's an SEC network, and the Pac-10 broadcast rights have made a lot less money than the other major the other Power 5 conferences. And so really all this really comes down to is TV revenue. And Rich, that's the answer to your University of Texas basketball question. It's because they make a lot of money through the Big 12 television network.
It's interesting that South Carolina is on the list, but Clemson is not. And Clemson has been a steady riser in the NCAA football field. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, you answered your own question. What conference is Clemson in?
ACC.
What conference is South Carolina in?
SEC.
There you go. Boom.
Yeah.
The SEC television rights are worth astronomically more than the ACC. It's all about ultimately how many eyeballs are going to watch. And most of these conferences now have their own dedicated networks. I don't think the ACC has an ACC network. If they do, I'm not aware of it. They might. I'm not aware of it. But I know even if they do, it doesn't make but a fraction of what the SEC does.
So
they made for basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
It's interesting that University of Maryland left the ACC for the Big Ten, and there's no Big Ten school on this list. Ohio State. I'm sorry.
Michigan. There's Michigan too.
Okay, and Ohio State. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely Big Ten schools.
Yeah, and Penn State. Also.
Yeah.
So it's. Maryland is kind of the have-not of the Big Ten, though. Let's be honest.
Well, it's one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen in college sports. It was
terrible move. Dumb.
Absolutely. Now, to Steve's point, and probably to the point, it probably wasn't financially. It's some bottom line thing, the TV revenue deal that they're getting. So if you're red line, black lining it, probably makes sense for them. But, and so from that, if that's the only metric, then it was probably successful for them. But every other metric, and maybe even long-term bottom line, it was a ridiculous move.
If there's one thing I think hopefully we've taught you guys who've listened to the show for a long time, it's that everything in sports ultimately comes down to money. Don't be under the impression that the NCAA cares a whit about competition, or that the NFL cares about how many people, the NFL cares about the fan experience, or anything like that. All these things always come down to money. And the NCAA in particular, the NCAA, first of all, is just flat out corrupt. Okay? It's not a worthwhile organization. They do a ton of things wrong. And really, ultimately, certain people and certain schools are getting very, very, very rich. And that's what it comes down to. Don't be under the impression that all these moves, these conference moves and all these networks are because they care about the fan experience. It's only because of this revenue. And frankly, if you want to get into the larger point, what is the Texas Athletic Department doing with $183 million? I mean, they're putting it back into athletics and buying the best, gyms and the best locker rooms and the best this and that. You could make a valid moral argument, which may be bigger than the point we're making today. You could make a valid argument that money should go into the primary purpose of the university, which is education, which it's not doing right now.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what percentage of those funds get reappropriated back into non-athletic parts of the university structure.
I suspect it's very little, but I don't know that. But I would suspect it's not much.
Well, I think there's I haven't, to be honest, I have sort of opted out, not in a big grandstandy way, and so it's a little bit of gradual, but I just have sort of opted out of college sports as to a large degree. Some of it's just I only have so much time in my life and media diet, and so I pick the things that I want to focus on and keep the same sort of fervent energy that I've had through most of my life with. So that's partly, but partly it's just because it is so gross and there's so much corruption. And at least in pro sports, that everyone sort of knows the deal, right? It is big business. It's business from the start. Everyone's out to get theirs. Like, at least the playing field is known. You can have problems within that, sure, and equity, yada, 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 which I do. But at least it's a known what everyone's getting into. And the exploitation is even opt-in to a large degree, even if you feel exploited or you think people are being exploited. It's opt-in exploitation.
I've had the same exact thought as you, actually, Chris. I mean, I used to watch a lot of college football, every Saturday, for example. And yeah, I mean, kind of life and time marches on. And, when you get to a certain point, you can't just take a Saturday and watch football all day long, for sure. But beyond that, I'm just not that interested in watching Alabama versus, Southwest Arkansas State at Fayetteville. And it's not competitive in any way, shape, or form. It's only about the fact that Southeast Arkansas at Fayetteville is making a couple $1 million off the University of Alabama. It has nothing to do whatsoever with competition or football. It's only about money, and it just doesn't really interest me. And there's only a handful of games each year that are legitimately competitive. Programs on the same level in terms of the amount of money they can spend on their teams. And I think you're right. It's college, particularly college football and men's college basketball, are amateur sports in name only. They're really professionally run organizations, and it kind of disgusts me to a certain extent just because it's a big lie. I hate lies more than anything, and it's really a lie, and that's partly why I've weaned myself off it, like you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I don't know if you guys heard of Hampton University. Hampton University is a historically black university in the Tidewater area of Virginia, and they've come under a lot of scrutiny because they left the MEAC, which is the traditionally black conference of schools. They left the MEAC for the Sun Belt Conference. So they have always been, they played among, historically black colleges, and they left that league for that conference for the Sun Belt, and the president has taken a lot of heat. But it's a big money grab. Yeah. And so, whether do you take tradition over money? You take money over tradition is the bottom line.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did. I'm sure the Sun Belt Conference is paying them a lot more money,
right?
Right. Than what's MEAC?
The MEAC
for?
MEAC,
yeah, the
Middle Eastern Athletic Conference. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it serves a great purpose, and it's rooted in history, and it's rooted in trying to beat discrimination and some of the awful things that have happened to African Americans in this country, and all that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, not a lot of people watch it.
But what's interesting is, just talking about, to your point, Steve. I don't know if it's a bad thing, Alabama playing, Middle Arkansas State. I mean, that's their payday. That $2 million or $1 million they get is like a tax return. It gets them through. It basically pays for, everything, uniforms, travel, and things like that. So, I mean,
I don't fault Middle Tennessee State or whatever for taking the game, because you're right, they're making money. I'm just saying.
No disrespect to our listeners, for Middle Tennessee State alumni. So
yeah, they understand. Yeah, but all my point is, it doesn't make for interesting football for the fan. I'm not interested in that game because it's a complete waste of time.
Right.
And every big Power 5 school, does 3 or 4 of those games a year. It just doesn't interest me, and it's clearly in the case of the Power 5 conferences, it's just about boosting their record with an easy victory. And for the teams that are getting beat up on, it's just about a payday.
Well,
and it's not about true amateur athletic mano-a-mano level competition.
Well,
can you imagine?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
We already, and it just dropped last night, and I think we should talk about this in the future, but HBO just came out with a documentary called Student Athlete. I think literally debuted last night, which I think should be fascinating and covers a lot of this already, or not already, but covers this topic. But can you imagine, we already are, this level of college athletics is already exploitive and is off the labor of the athletes at this level of money. That's just a given. Can you imagine being that Middle Tennessee State head coach, knowing all of the real reasons why you're taking this game and have to lead those men out to slaughter to take, for a $2 million payday for the university? And I know even down to the backup left guard can understand that to some way sort of intellectually, but that doesn't mean that what a, kind of horrible experience to say, hey guys, let's go, you're going to see no benefit, but let's go take one for the team being the university structure, and get our asses handed to us on national TV.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I look at we talked about the University of Maryland. They left the ACC for the Big Ten, but I was just on their campus last week, and they've got a lot of construction going on in that Route 1 corridor. I mean, I don't know if you guys haven't been in this area for a while, but the University of Maryland area. And they've got a lot of, Route 1 doesn't look the same like it used to. So maybe there is something to it.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do research at the University of Maryland Library, on a regular basis. Yeah, it's changed a lot. But to your point, Chris, I mean, I don't know how a coach looks his players in the eye and goes, okay, man, here's the game plan where we're going to beat Ohio State. I realize you guys are Southeast Illinois at Carbondale, but we can beat them, and here's how. Everybody knows that that's not going to happen. Everybody knows it's going to be 52-0, and it's really just about the money, and it's not about anything else but that. Tell
their kids, hey, I played against
Ohio State or Michigan or
they've
whatever.
They've probably got pictures posted on their wall of, hey, this is me, playing against, Nick Saban or Urban Meyer.
Didn't Nick Saban just have a little
meltdown,
whining party about fans not caring? I mean, his own fans not caring about going to the game where the land of slaughter. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, this week, that's interesting. Glad you brought that up, because the story, I think, was that the ticket prices for the Alabama game this week, I don't know who they're playing, but whatever one was addressed to Nick Saban was one of these slaughter games. It was, North Carolina State, whoever. But they brought it up to Nick Saban because the tickets are going for $5 in the upper deck. And he just went on a little mini rant. And everybody who knows me knows I hate Nick Saban. I can't stand him.
So if you guys don't know, I went to the mighty Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and season tickets for our football season tickets are $50. So
for the whole season?
For the whole season.
Oh,
$50.
Wow.
So go Lions.
There's only sort of two ways this is going to go. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen next year. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next 5 years. But if you kind of start to let this play out, there's either going to be, at some point, there's going to need to be a reckoning, and you're going to have to draw a circle around the SEC and the Big Ten and, whatever, and create a semi-pro league and legitimize this sort of semi-proness of college athletics at that level. Or, a free market solution is going to come up, and we see small attempts, especially in basketball. And if we have our colleague Alex Zeese will tell you that this is going to happen in football, but minor league system is going to have to be. There's going to be a market disruptor that's going to be able to take advantage of this, and you got a pretty good hook. Hey, 18-year-old, would you like to earn revenue off your talents and skills? So eventually, something like that is going to disrupt.
And here's another layer to it. Do schools really care if they actually win? Or maybe it's, just get to a bowl game. If we could we're not going to win the national championship. We're never going to be in the top 5. But if we can get to the Poulon Weed Eater Bowl and get that payday, we're good. It's a successful season.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, they're already doing that.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this maybe a year ago to a certain extent, but these bowl games for most teams are loss leaders. In case people don't understand this, because how the bowl games work is the bowl, and people are making obscene amounts of money on these bowl games, but it's the people who are running the bowls who are making obscene amounts of money, not the schools. Because what happens is they will require a school, they'll invite Southeast Louisiana State to go to the Weed Whacker Bowl, in wherever, in Kansas City or something, and they'll require the schools to buy a block of tickets, a lot of, like 30,000 tickets or more. And if the school sells them, great. If they don't, that's their problem. And so actually a lot of the schools, between that and the travel and the extra game and everything, they're actually losing money on these bowl games. It's a loss leader, and they're doing it because they want to be able to tell the next recruiting class, hey, we went to the Weed Whacker Bowl. We're on the rise. You can go to the Weed Whacker Bowl too. And that's really what it's about, more than the money. And that money is being funneled into local guys who the bowl games are a big scam too. We need to do another expose on that. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't know about that, but the Popeyes.
I do. I'm telling you, that's the truth.
The Popeyes Bowl. I think there's a Popeyes Chicken Bowl. It's moved away from tradition of the Independence Bowl and the Peach Bowl and all that kind of stuff to. It's a bowl game for everybody.
Well, that's why it was so comical when the NCAA, and I still think their playoff system is ridiculous, but when there was nothing, it was like, oh, the tradition of the bowls. How can we upend the tradition of the bowls? Now, meanwhile, this is 10 years past our first, add your corporate sponsorship here for a bowl game that's going to be a battle of 2, 4, and 6 teams. Mind you. So they had already degraded the value of the bowls, but I just love it when they use the tradition defense against any kind of progress in the sport.
And yet Tostitos is the sponsor of the Fiesta Bowl now.
Yeah.
And I just think instantly, Rich, I think it's funny that a fried chicken company is sponsoring an athletic event.
Yeah.
Because I think crazy. The last thing you'd want to do as an elite athlete is eat fried chicken.
Yeah, and the thing is, but now this is another top, but it's interesting that these gift bags that the kids get when they go to these bowl games. They get these extravagant gift bags. Our own the Washington Redskins, Jeremy Sprinkle, who went to Arkansas, I believe.
Yeah, Arkansas.
And he got a decent gift bag and still wanted to shoplift and steal, but that's another topic. Maybe we should move on.
Well, yeah, but the interesting thing about the gift bags is that what's not you can't, your coach or a booster cannot buy a college NCAA athlete a hot dog for lunch, but what's not illegal for them to accept? The gift bags from the sponsors of the bowl games. And sometimes if you go to the big bowl games, they can be worth 4 figures,
right?
Like thousands of dollars of stuff. If you go to the Weed Whacker Bowl in Kansas City, it's going to be significantly less. But the NCAA has made a specific exception for the gift bags from their rules regarding what athletes can accept, because God help us if we offend a sponsor. It's sad. The whole thing disgusts me, quite honestly. I just wish, like you said, Chris, that let's just be open and honest about it and say this is a professional thing. Let's call it a professional thing. You can't. This is definitely another topic for another day, but it's really hard to pay players. It's really against federal law to do it in the way people think. You can't just sign up and pay, the quarterback at I don't know, Michigan, some amount of money, because there's a whole Title IX effect that goes along with it. You can't pay the football team a lot of money and then not pay the women's sports anything. That's against the law. And so the reason why nobody's solved it is it's a far more complicated problem than fans and some of these dumb football players, who think I deserve to be paid. It's a lot more complicated than people think. And that's why it hasn't been done.
Yeah, but we've also gotten somebody to the moon. So if we want to figure it out, they can.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not saying it's not solvable. I'm just saying that's why it hasn't been.
No, it's will, not talent, so to speak. I mentioned before we hit the live mics here that I've been checking out Kevin Sheehan, local DC sports talk head that got bounced from 980 a couple months ago, has relaunched as a podcast. And so I was checking it out this week. And he had a really interesting, this isn't a point around this I think is interesting to sort of paint a picture about college athletics and the money. He was looking at the salaries of the top tier college men's basketball and football coaches' salaries compared to coaches in professional leagues. And he was using Dave Martinez of the Nationals, which makes about in the neighborhood of $900,000 a year to coach a Major League Baseball team. And looking at the salaries of your Sabins and your Patino, not anymore, but I guess he is still there. Your Patinos, right? Where you're talking $5, $6, $7 million a year, and looking across. So to show you
look at Urban Meyer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in hockey, baseball, and even to some degree the NBA, you have coaches of professional organizations, top of their profession, by non-money metrics, making 1/4 what college coaches make in their programs. That's a little bit of a tell about how off kilter this is.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, if because the amount of money at risk with the Urban Meyer story was $37 million, if I recall. If any university can afford to pay a head coach that much, tens of millions of dollars, that means they're making tens of millions more, and we prove that to you with this list. It all comes down to money. Like, for example, anybody can anybody take a guess who's the highest paid employee of the federal government?
I knew that. I'm sorry, in the interest of time, I don't know.
Okay, well, it's not the president.
No,
okay,
I
the
know
president makes a $400,000 salary a year, and that's certainly the highest salary in any civil servant. But the football coaches at
the state university.
The football coaches at the service academies, at Annapolis, West Point, and the Air Force Academy, they have contracts that are on a par with mid-tier university coaches. And I don't necessarily know if that's appropriated money from the federal government, but the point is, those coaches are making a lot of money, and they're definitely the highest paid players, highest paid people in federal government service. So there you go. It's all about money, kids. That's the conclusion.
All right, well, we're going to slide into some other stories that probably will not break that thesis. Rich, you brought to our attention, we have talked about the Baylor controversy and their issues in the past, but we sort of got some new news, or at least new news to us. Rich, you want to introduce that story?
So the Baylor is, and it's interesting, this kind of flew under the radar, and Steve mentioned this early, that the Baylor sex assault allegations and investigation has concluded, and I assume that it was concluded years ago, but it has just been concluded, and it's been a while. And from what I understand, the Baylor community is on watch because from what it says, the allegations appear they said there's a lack of quote unquote lack of institutional control, which is a major classification from the NCAA. So they're on the death penalty watch down there in Baylor. Not that it's going to happen, but
yeah, if you guys want to find this, the articles from Business Insider from October 3rd. NCAA completes this investigation into Baylor's sexual assault scandal. And yeah, I like you, Rich. I had thought this was done years ago. If people remember, the backstory here is that Art Briles. This happened when Art Briles was the coach of the football team, but they had a series of sexual assaults that had happened between the football team and local students. And this article also cites something else that just totally blew my mind. Here it is. An all-female, this is from the article Business Insider. the former Baylor Title IX coordinator Patty Crawford alleged that an all-female student group called the Baylor Bruins was on call for football players to make sure they had a good time. And in her deposition in the case, Crawford said that several members of this group were forced to quit the team because they became pregnant with football players' children. Yeah. And so this group of Baylor students is basically the on-call house of prostitution for the Baylor football team. That's a part of it, and then the sexual assaults are part of it. This is why Art Briles got ran out of Baylor, and I think Baylor hoped that if they fired Art Briles that they would get a pass. But listen, I mean, if Baylor is not, I don't believe Baylor was on the top 25 list, but they're making tens of millions of dollars.
They're not, but they're probably on the 50. If you extended it to 50, they'd be on it.
Baylor's not on the top 25, but they've made a lot of money. And if Penn State did not get the death penalty, Baylor isn't going to get the death penalty. I think the NCAA cares more about the money, and the school cares more about the money than sexual assault. And so they'll get some penalty, but the program isn't going to go away because too many people are making too much money. Sad to say.
And I hesitate to, I'm going to dip my toe, not jumping full in, but, and yet I still see Ken Starr somehow as a talking head on my TV now on an almost nightly basis. Let's not forget his involvement here, who was also run out of Baylor.
Yeah, that's true. And Rich brought this quote up, but I'm going to say it. Rich, am I allowed to say this quote?
Yes.
Okay. This is from the Business Insider has this quote. The Baylor Board of Regents has a man named Richard Willis, who was quoted as saying that Baylor had such good N-word football players because we have the best blonde-haired, blue-eyed females in the state of Texas, and he used an extremely derogatory word for females. That's what's going on at Baylor. They are on death penalty watch. I would bet my house. I would bet everything I own and will own that Baylor will not get the death penalty, and there will be some excuse as to why not. Baylor will cut a deal. Something will happen because nobody wants to lose the income from the football team. So I think it will go on, and, money rules all. Ultimately, it's not about your safety. It's about money. Sorry to say, kids.
And this is not a state school. This is ostensibly Christian university.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's like a Liberty University situation, but in a system of religiously backed schools, Catholic and otherwise, that's what
Baylor is a religious school.
Yeah. But not. I think we can all agree nothing will happen. And I don't know if this is directly related, but it is interesting to me that you look at those Art Briles players in the NFL, and they pretty much flamed out. Like there was something such poison in the water that the ones that, the guys that would have, legitimately had an NFL chance and got drafted, etc., they've all not had the fortitude, I think probably more mentally than physically, to survive in the NFL. It's just a little bit of an interesting asterisk on this story.
Yeah, I think it was probably more Art Briles' offense, more so than it was the talent of the players. And yeah, most Baylor players flame out. You're exactly right. I mean, the most obvious one, of course, Robert Griffin, but those guys that were all with him in that offense at Baylor, Kendall Wright, none of them have done anything substantial in the NFL. So I don't know why that is. Again, I think it's probably just Art Briles' spread system was putting up a ton of points, and it looked flashy and didn't translate,
Except there are versions of that offense that are working in the NFL.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. You want to hit the one last thing here real quick before we sign off, because we're running out of time. But we also wanted to mention that we talked about Nike. What, 6 months ago, maybe, the Nike, Adidas scandal in the NCAA, in which an Adidas executive. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Nike. I meant Adidas. We talked about this scandal where an Adidas executive was paying high school kids to funnel them to certain universities and get them signed up with Adidas. The first trial is about to start, criminal corruption trial. is about to start here imminently, like this week. And so we will see what happens, but expect to see a lot more news come out about corruption in NCAA basketball as a result of the discovery in the trial. So stay tuned. And again, don't be surprised when you see that there's evidence of your favorite NCAA basketball school is involved in somehow funneling money to high school kids.
You mean to
far
tell
more widespread.
You mean to tell me that Kentucky would do something like that?
Say it isn't so.
Would no, not the University of Kentucky. No way.
Yeah, they're totally innocent. Yeah, they're innocent little sheriffs at all these top programs.
This story, which we have hit on a number of times in our 39 show history, and probably I would say I can say with a good amount of certitude we'll hit it again, because this is a slow boiler. This is a drip, 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 but it is making its way, through the courts. This is going to, we've had it kind of blow up or kind of, rise at different times, but this story is going to have momentum. It's going to have some major implications. It's going to blow up some programs, and it'll probably at least force a conversation. Now, whether results or changes come is a whole different ball game, but it's going to force some conversations about the issues that we've been talking about today. And, when stories like this are on a slow boil, when they're methodical, and when they're in the system to this degree, that only means that the evidence, the data, the case making is taking its time, which is usually not a good sign for the people they're coming after.
Well, you know what the difference is? The difference is that this Adidas case was taken on by the federal government. The FBI was investigating this. This isn't... See, the NCAA has all these rules, like we talked about. You can't buy a kid a cheeseburger, and you can't give him $20 for gas. And the NCAA has a whole investigative arm that pretends to investigate this stuff, and they're horrible at it. They're just the worst at it. But the difference with this Adidas case is that the FBI took this on. The federal government is very good at investigation when they want to be, at least. And the FBI in particular is very good at it. And the federal prosecutors have something like a 99% success rate, conviction rate. So these people are going to go down, and the FBI is not afraid of blowing up the NCAA, as Chris said. And so this one is a case that will have implications, because it's not the NCAA trying to protect its own here. Trying to say we don't care that Jerry Sandusky raped kids in a shower, just move on because, nothing to see here, there's money to be made. The FBI and the federal prosecutors will do it right. And so, yeah, I think this case is important and something to watch in the future. It's not one case. There's going to be a whole series of them.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our run of show, as they say in the biz. So, Rich, again, we're really sorry to see you go. I've really enjoyed talking with you and getting to know you over these last 39 shows, equaling 2 years, basically. So, looking forward to you to come back and join us at a future guest spot. Yeah. And it's been fun.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed you guys. Before we leave, I would be remiss if I didn't get the great Chris Larry's opinion on the Tom Wilson suspension.
Oh, the Tom Wilson suspension. Well, listen, I think it was too long. It is a deep hurt in the first quarter of the season for the Caps, and it's a big hit to his pocketbook. And I do think it'll end up getting reduced anywhere from 2 to 5 games in arbitration and appeal. However, we've entered a part of sports, and the football and probably National Hockey League are the two biggest examples where they have got to take head hits very seriously, both from a player safety and, more importantly, from a legal safety standpoint. And there's no doubt in both of those leagues that there are marked guys, and if you're one of those marked guys, whether you're Palomalu a couple years ago or these other types or Tom Wilson, you've got they're going to come after you, and you can pretty much assume that any suspension or any disciplinary is going to be double for you than it would be for a player without a reputation. And so ultimately, and the Caps and Caps fans can kick and scream as much as they want, and I'll join them there to a degree. But you got to know the rules. And that's where I think the teams in the NFL that are avoiding these hits on quarterbacks, as ridiculous as the interpretations of the rule are, you've got to play differently. You've got to play within the bounds of the interpretation of the rules, or you're going to get slammed. And ultimately, that comes back to the players and the teams to be smart, and being smart is what wins championships. So ultimately, it's back on the perpetrators to understand their situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to equate this to football, he got a 20-game suspension for this, which is about a fourth of the NHL season, and so you're talking 4 games, in an NFL season, and we probably ought to do this as a story on another show, because I think the NFL's flags they're throwing on the quarterback, the roughing quarterback, have just been absolutely ridiculous. It's just absurd what they're doing, and I feel like I want to start a GoFundMe for Clay Matthews fines because of the way he's been treated. But
hey,
again, he's very wealthy, and I'm not contributing a cent to it.
I'm not crying. I'm not losing one tear for Clay Matthews, because at some point the Redskins are going to have a call that's going to go in that direction with them. So, yeah, I don't care. But anyway, guys, I didn't mean to go do show part 2, but it's been great, guys, and you can catch me on Twitter as usual at DiscoQ5, DiscoQue5 on Twitter. I'm usually there just spouting my usual. Check out my latest tweet about I don't understand why they have to redo another Halloween with a 60-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers. But that's just me. Maybe it's just me. But catch me on Twitter.
All right. You can't find me on Twitter. Please don't try. But I am a lot of times at the Hogsty on Twitter.
You can find me at ChrisLarry33. Got into, Rich jumped in a little bit, but I was sparring with some younger fella who was defending Swearinger's, ridiculous claim that they're going to hold Breeze from this record.
That's crazy.
That was a funny little back and forth.
That's not going to happen. Yeah.
He's stupid.
Yeah.
I had this in the game preview, written game preview on the Hogsty. Drew Brees. No, it was in my Drew Brees article from Wednesday. Drew Brees has thrown for under 200 yards 6 times in the last 10 years. So it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could trip on his shoelaces, puke on the sidelines, and spike the ball on a 3rd down and get 200 yards by halftime. And also, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it actually is meaningless in the outcome of the game. In fact, if he throws for 400 plus yards, you may probably be in a better chance to win.
Yeah, it's not even a reflection on the Redskins.
I mean,
yes.
Twitter is the place where we go for rational arguments. I got into a Twitter argument. Into a Twitter argument with a guy that said, so Adrian Peterson bought all of the Redskins offensive linemen scooters.
The scooters?
Yeah. And this guy says, why would you do that? You're going to go broke. And this. I'm like, dude, Adrian Peterson has made $97.7 million in career earnings. So
he can afford to buy 20 scooters.
I'm sure he can buy 20 scooters. So even with his $1.1 million deal, I'm sure he can still buy 20 scooters, which is a really good gesture. It's something that we haven't heard of in a while here in the Redskins. But anyway, guys, signing off. Loved it, enjoyed it, and I will be a listener, and I'll be a substitute teacher every now and then.
All right. Well, with that brings us to the close of our 39th or 40th? 39th episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network. We will see you in approximately 2 weeks' time.
Take it easy.